Welcome to the Skilled channel, and today we're looking at Adr1ft. Adr1ft is a smaller scale game, but the premise is very interesting. It's about being lost and alone in space, mixing realism and a cinematic experience. And I'm not usually into these exploration games, but this one has me curious. Adr1ft is the story of an astronaut floating through a destroyed space station with no memory of what just recently happened. Set in the year 2037, players assume the role of Commander Alex Oshima, a female astronaut. If you found yourself lost in space, what would be your first move? Survival, of course. You'll have to float your way through the space station, and along the way you find clues to what happened and who was on board the ship with you. The environment is very open, but ironically, there are realistic limits based on the situation. Important things like managing your oxygen levels can prevent you from venturing too far.
EA suit critically damaged. Hardeman Aerospace North Star 4. Survivor detected.
Adr1ft is often compared to walking simulators like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture or Firewatch, but the developer denies this comparison. It's first person and it's exploration, but it's a sci-fi experience about being lost and hopeless. There are no guns, and there's no combat. Adr1ft, the lead game designer, described the balance of survival aspects. We have a very cool movement mechanic. Oxygen is a shared resource between health and movement. You have this damaged EVA suit, but your propulsion pack is also damaged. You're taking your oxygen and using that as a resource for movement and staying alive. Your suit is very slowly leaking oxygen, always. When you use your propulsion, that depletes it faster. You have to make little decisions about, do I go for this oxygen canister or do I keep going over here? All these micro decisions, if nothing else, it's stressful. Decision making will be a big part of the adventure, which determines your survival. This is just the premise and the setup of the story. The rest has been kept under wraps because it's the most important part of the game. This is a story-driven exploration game. The highlight is about your experience discovering things for yourself. Everything in the game is about balance. From controls to capabilities, everything is limited just enough to give you this feeling of helplessness, but still keep the game engaging. It's more about the experience than it is about being a space simulator. The concept for Adr1ft came from a few surprising events. Adr1ft is the lead creator on the game, and he came up with the idea after losing his position at Microsoft. The situation was highly controversial. He was let go after a problem with several discontent fans on Twitter. He created the idea of an astronaut lost in space as a metaphor for his own life. It's based on actions, consequences, and redemption. Many people compare the game to the movie Gravity, which is also about a female astronaut alone in space, and also other highly regarded space movies such as 2001: A Space Odyssey and the recent hit Interstellar. Adr1ft claims his idea was completely original and not influenced by Gravity, but he acknowledges the comparisons. What's also interesting is that the game has been produced by a core team of just 6 developers. Previously, Adr1ft worked on big budget titles, not just for Microsoft, but other well-known companies. So it's a different development cycle than what the team is used to.
It's been a week since she sent me her piano piece. The transfer was barely registered with her. Guess I'm not surprised. This is a pattern for me. I thought she'd at least be happy to hear I'm coming.
As you can imagine from what you've heard so far, the storytelling of the game will be unique. The story is revealed based on finding clues in the environment, but the order of information you get will be non-linear. So you'll be piecing together and interpreting the story in your own head. The history and personality of the other astronauts that are missing or deceased will mostly come in the form of audio logs. You'll listen to these logs as you drift your way to a solution. We already mentioned that there would be critical decision making for survival, but there's also decision making for moral choices. Like, how do you handle the bodies of deceased astronauts? And most important of all, the ending is supposed to be very surprising. In fact, many of the story elements will be open to interpretation. Adr1ft explained this in a detailed way without creating any spoilers. There is one for me, but it's open to interpretation. That was intentional. The ultimate thing, what I would love, is that when people finish the game, they had a moment to say, wow, something in there resonated with me. There was a parallel in my life. Maybe I can learn something.
Lucy's recital is a note-perfect Beethoven Sonata No. 8. Every time I hear it, I think about how I never got to where she is now. I gave up my dream a long time ago.
The game intends to have a price point that's less than a typical $60 retail cost, and that's because it's only going to be about 3 to 4 hours long in experience. The developers are comparing it to an interactive movie. It's a short experience, you'll probably only play it once, and some gamers are content with that. But there are many that argue whether or not they're getting enough content for their dollar. Do you think an experience that is only 3 to 4 hours for sub $60 is worth it? Let us know in the comments if game length is critical to your purchase decision.
Personal log. System Specialist. McDonough, Andrew. 11 June 2037.
In 6 days.
Another standout feature of the game will be the soundtrack. Orth is actually experienced in composing, and he built most of the music in the game. But interestingly enough, there were contributions from the band Weezer, and they even tweeted about the game to give it a little promotion. The sound effects were produced by Skywalker Sound, the music recording division of George Lucas Digital Motion Picture Group. Beyond Star Wars, Skywalker Sound has produced soundtracks for tons of movies and a few games. And the soundtrack itself should be interesting, alternating between music, silence, and the mechanical robotic sounds of a space station.
EVA repair station located.
Adr1ft was always meant to be immersive, but it took time and development changes to fine-tune it. The prototype was developed in just 10 weeks by only 3 people in order to demonstrate it to publishers. The game was originally developed on Unity, but the team made the switch to Unreal Engine 4. Planned to launch in 2015, but it was delayed to add Oculus Rift compatibility and have it release alongside the Rift launch in 2016. It's obvious that introducing virtual reality in this first-person experience would change the feel of the game, but Orth seems to think it really produces a strong emotional response. Orth described it recently in an interview. Initially, I just approached the VR thing as extra immersion, like Immersion Plus, which it does give you. But what I wasn't prepared for is how it actually elicits emotions you're having. It's really hard to describe. It connects you to the game in a fundamental way because everyone knows or has their own idea of what being stranded out in space feels like. When you're able to even challenge the way someone thinks about that or meet it, it's very powerful. Adr1ft will be launching on PC, PS4, and Xbox One in Q1 2016, and you don't need a Rift to play it, but it may enhance the experience. Adr1ft has a lot of potential to get viewers engaged in a story that is ultimately what you make of it. Granted, it will be a short experience, but I'm okay with that if it is really exceptional. What are your thoughts on Adr1ft? Do you have any interest in playing it on the Oculus Rift, or any interest in playing the game at all for that matter? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe to the Skilled channel for more interesting upcoming games previews.